On our Christmas Day meditation, our Christmas all-day meditation, we listened to a talk by Swami Kriyananda in which he repeated Master's statement that the three wise men who came to visit Jesus in the manger were Sri Yukteswar, Lahiri, and Babaji. And that's a statement simply that Yogananda made as an emphatic statement of fact. It wasn't a speculation, it was just a statement. And a couple of days ago, someone who was relatively new to our temple asked me if I believed it. Fair question. And my answer was, how would I know? I mean, how could I possibly declare from anything resembling my own experience who the three wise men were? But I've had a great deal of experience of the power of this path. And I've had a great deal of experience of the power of Yogananda, of Master as we call him, especially through Swami Kriyananda and everything that Kriyananda has given to us and to me of Master's teachings and his testimony about Yogananda in addition to my own experience. So I also have no reason to doubt. And not too long ago, I was conversing with someone who's facing a very challenging personal situation. The outcome is far from certain, what's going to happen. And naturally, as a longtime devotee, my friend is trying to affirm a positive attitude and so on. But someone said to him very directly, "Do you have faith in God?" Like that. "Well, I'm trying to," was his response. And then his inquisitor said, "Do you have faith in God?" And he said, "Yes," like this. So he brought the question in conversation to me. And it wasn't a question, he was just telling me this story. And I stopped to think about that for a moment. Because if someone looks at you like that, especially when there's a lot on the line, we don't always have the confidence to say, yes, that I do believe. What does that mean? In fact, there's whole churches that are just based on, do you believe? Yes, I believe. So my comment was this. We demonstrate the faith that we have every day simply by how we live. And it isn't really a question of somebody pinning you against the wall and asking you what you think, because what you think often has very little to do with who you actually are. Our minds can play all kinds of games with us, and we can have all kinds of ideas about things that when it really comes down to real life, we're not really sure. The military in the United States and probably in other countries has put out an enormous amount of money, energy, time, and trouble to try to figure out who's going to be a hero. Because if they knew who was going to be the heroes, they would help them to give the right assignments, wouldn't it? They find it's absolutely unpredictable. Because what a person will say in the comfort of a room with a multiple choice test or something like that, or even with a video simulation probably in front of them now, has nothing to do with who we are when everything else is stripped away and all that's left is just the pure vibration of our consciousness. And when I was speaking to my friend about the challenges that he's facing and whether he has faith or not, I said, has it ever occurred to you in the face of this challenge to turn your back on the spiritual path? To blame God and gurus for what appears to be your misfortune? To find another way of life? To figure that's it for me? If this is going to happen, then I'm out of here as fast as I can go. And it was a comical question, because of course he never thought of that, ever. Because you see, regardless of what he answers the question, he has absolute faith in God. He has faith in God so much so that an entire life has been devoted to following the spiritual path. And the mere fact that obstacles have come, what does that have to do with my love for God? What does that have to do with my understanding of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it? So we come now to experiences and events and circumstances. Christ was born in a manger as a fully self-realized being. His love radiated and attracted the wise men and the angels. And the Bible even tells us it was a virgin birth, that Mary was a maiden even after the child was born. All these various miraculous things. Do you believe? I don't know. I don't know whether I believe it or not. Someone sent me an article of interest about the actual theological nicety of the Immaculate Conception as it actually relates to Mary's mother, Anne. This tremendous effort to make sure that Mary was pure. I mean, the intention is good, the means are a little misguided. But nonetheless, I wrote back after glancing very briefly at the article, thank God I don't have to try to get my faith from these theological hair splits. Who cares, really? What is our faith based on? Is it based on some carefully reasoned dogma and somebody's assertion, the Pope's in this case, of this happened or that happened and this is true and that's not true? Or is your faith based on what you actually experience? Of how it changes your life to have a relationship with God? And what price you would put on that? What would cause you to give that up? Could anything cause you to give that up? That's the measure of your faith, right there. Would you turn your back on your spiritual practices? And what we have in the life of Jesus, now of course we're celebrating the baby side of it. Swamiji always talks about how ironic it is, because that the innocence of this childbirth is very short-lived. I mean, even within his babyhood, the king of the time feels threatened by the news that there is this divine child. In fact, the 3 wise men tip off the king. Because they've come such a distance to find him, the king becomes very anxious. He feels this is a very bad omen. And so, having the power to do such things and the ignorance to carry it out, sort of like our culture at this time, we have the power to do a lot and the ignorance to do a lot of it. So he had the power and he wanted to eliminate the threat. So he had all the babies under the age of 2 killed. Just imagine. This is the beginning of the life of Jesus. And Joseph was tipped off in a dream. An angel came and said, take your child and your wife and go to Egypt. Get away. So they fled, but all the other slaughter of the innocents. All of these mothers had their babies ripped away from them and killed by the power of the king. I mean, we forget all of the struggle and the contradiction that is inherent in life in this world. And that is the question. Do we keep turning back to the light? Or in the presence of darkness, are we tempted to just panic and try to make ourselves safe in some other way? Do we actually believe that there's any other way to make ourselves safe? You see, that's actually the question. Joseph was told in a dream, take the baby to Egypt. And then several years later, after that king had died and there was safety, he came back, but not all the way. He didn't come all the way back. That's when they stopped in Nazareth, because he didn't want to come all the way back. He wasn't sure. So we have this child who has so much power and is now going to liberate so many souls from delusion. But the first response to his presence, or I should say the immediate response to his presence, is all this death and suffering. Isn't that ironic, to say the very least? But that is also a pattern, isn't it? The light begins to assert itself, and then there's always this counterforce. There's always this counterforce. And if we're going to measure our spiritual life by whether or not there's a counterforce, well, we're going to have a very short spiritual life. Very short. And if we're going to measure our faith only by the words that we can put together or the theology that we can describe, we're going to have a very tenuous hold on our spiritual life. Our spiritual life has to be based on our own inner knowledge that is so profound, you see, that the details don't matter. I can't say from my own experience many, many things that Master asserted, and many things that Swami Kriyananda said. I had no way of understanding. Some of it philosophical. I heard Swamiji explain the illusory nature of time probably 50 times over the course of many years. I'm still absolutely bewildered. They all tell me that time is an illusion, but golly, you could fool me. You know, I don't know what any of that means. One of my friends, assuming that I had a scholarly nature that I don't have, asked me the difference between this Sanskrit whatever and that Sanskrit whatever. I had no idea. I'd never even heard those words. I didn't know what she was talking about. It's just not where spiritual life for me comes from. Faith for me is simply this: what would I do without God to turn to? What would we do in all that darkness when all that counterforce comes if we didn't have that thread of light to hold on to? So we come at Christmas and we celebrate it in the most beautiful way that we possibly can. So it will give us an inner glimpse of what our lives are really meant to be. Master talks about this in the Whispers from Eternity. He's teaching us how to pray. He said so often what we pray for is we pray for God, as Master puts it so bluntly, to break his own divine laws. We ourselves have set in motion certain necessary lessons, certain actions that will have inevitable consequences, whether we've done it in this incarnation or a previous incarnation. We've committed ourselves to a certain amount of misery by our own wrong thinking and by our own wrong actions. And then, when those bills have to be paid, then we try to say, oh, there must be a mistake here. And then we plead with God to be spared the inevitable consequences of our own actions. And in Whispers from Eternity, it's very interesting, because Master emphasizes very strongly in his introduction, we are the children of God. We should not pray like beggars. We must demand of God our divine birthright. But then when you go and read the prayers, what we're always demanding is that we feel joy in the midst of whatever happens. And you don't find any prayers in there for the new car, the new job, the new relationship. You know, even the cure to the disease, you don't really find it. Every prayer is to raise my consciousness so I can feel your presence no matter what comes. And you see, that's what our faith ends up being built on. That was the power that Jesus brought, because the other side of his life is is Easter. Just in a few months, when the grown man, the fulfillment of the promise of his birth, stands in front of every horror that the human mind can imagine. Torture, humiliation, betrayal, death, everything, abandonment, everything. Even toward the end of his life, his own disciples were fleeing in droves. And then just seemingly everything going to nothing. Of course it didn't. But how did he face that? He faced that with the consciousness of the light behind it all. What happened when Joseph knew that Jesus' life was threatened? He heard the voice of the Spirit within. The Spirit said, flee, this is not your destiny. Go away, this is not meant for you to happen. They had to turn their backs on all those to whom it would happen, but they were guided by that. And so are we. if we give ourselves to it. If no matter how hard we are pushed into sadness, into disappointment, into loneliness, all the things that happen, just the gradual wearing out that life imposes on us, and if we always push back, no, I am God's child. That's what Master wants us to understand. We are children of God, and divine consciousness is our birthright. Losing a job, losing a home, losing a family, all of these things are extremely intense and extremely difficult. But if in the midst of it we don't lose our relationship with God, then in the end we will find that the waves have gone up and down, but our consciousness of the ocean remains unchanged. This is the great promise of the birth of Jesus, of the great promise of all of these great masters. Look, I am here with you. And not in some abstract theological, hair-splitting this and that. I am here with you in human form. Many times has that light descended, drawn to earth by the call of aspiring love, our aspiration to have that love. God incarnates. He lives and walks among us. He takes on the burden of human life. He deals with exactly what we have to deal with. But he does it as God's own. He does it with the power inherent within all of us. And even as we rejoice in the birth of the baby, never for a moment forget the power that is underneath it. And call it whatever you like, believe whatever you like, take the Master's words as gospel if you wish or not, but somewhere in your own heart, make that connection. And recognize it for what it is. Our human griefs, your love alone can mend. What a promise that is. Every time I say that in the festival, just even those two words, human griefs. What a word. What a concept. Your love alone can mend. What a promise. That's what we're celebrating. The descent of spirit in human form to manifest what can be born within all of us. This is the birth. And we get to have a rebirth time and time again in this beautiful cycle, of course, which is so beautifully attached to the dark, 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 dark of the planet, which just turns. And now it starts getting light again. Just when you think, oh, I can't stand another day of this darkness, you realize, oh, now the light's going to start expanding. What a beautiful metaphor. How could it be more obvious? The Christ has descended. I receive him in my heart. And now the light starts expanding. Do you have faith in God? Doesn't matter what you say. Where do you turn? Where do you turn? When human griefs strike, where do you turn? Turn to the light, turn to the divine, turn to the Christ within.